You're listening to the REITE Club podcast, where the focus is all about helping you grow your real estate investment portfolio and live the life you want to live. Come grow with us and join our community at thereiteclub.com. And now your hosts, Sarah Larby and Alfonso Salemi.
I guess that was going to be my next question, although I think you already partly answered it, was who is the best, or who's the best fit in terms of a someone in a joint venture with you. And so you said you managing expectations. So you want to know, I guess you want to know what their expectations are, and you have to lay your expectations out on the table, right? What else are you looking for in a really good partner when you go into something like that?
Yeah, and I think that comes down to knowing their expectations and really knowing what ours are, because in our standards and everything, right? We didn't probably dive deep enough on that for ourselves enough. And if you go deeper on yourself with that, you understand now what your expectations are going to set out there to the world. So, for us, our perfect partners, just they're really busy in something else. They're not sitting at home doing nothing, because often those are the people that start asking a lot more questions down the road and are a lot more time to manage them from a client care type of a perspective. So really busy people that are in busy professions. It doesn't always have to be that, but they're great, because then they are obviously busy doing other stuff and they just want to get a better return than they're getting elsewhere. So someone who's got less time to spend on this type of thing, sees the value in it, knows that real estate's a great thing, and is just someone that ultimately they're usually not as one thing I found is the tough people to deal with. For me, this isn't necessarily for everyone, but for me and us, it's kind of the really engineers and accountants type of people, where they're very numbers driven, really want to know every little detail. That doesn't mean that that's not the right person for other people. I find a lot of times for us, where I'm not the best at giving details. Like I in the meetings or anything, and we start going too heavy duty on details, I'm going to lose it a little bit. So that's more just a personal one, but I think that might resonate for a lot of people, is it's a little easier to manage people that maybe don't need to know every detail. Not that we're hiding stuff, it's just easier to move faster and move on with it.
It makes sense, right? If you're not analytical and they're very analytical, how you communicate your thoughts into them understanding is going to clash. I can totally see that. And the other thing you mentioned, I think, is important to also, first of all, I will say you don't always have to JV. If you can do it by yourself, feel free to start by yourself. That's how I started as well. So there's JV partners that are active, and then there's JV partners that are passive. The other thing that I can think of, so you're very active in the business, you're likely going to be the active partner. You likely always were. And then so you're looking for somebody to bring you the financing and the money and essentially be more passive and just get a better return on the money. But I'll tell you, it's important to understand who is who and lay out those expectations, because if all of a sudden you've got somebody that's supposed to be passive, but is picking out all of the reno materials and everything like that, that could go, south pretty quickly if you've got two active people, but one was not supposed to be, as active.
Yeah, and I'll tell you one other thing there that we've tweaked now over time that we were doing at the start was just giving them too much information. We'd expect they wanted to know a lot of things, and they always can if they want to know, but we would just over communicate it in some ways too much. Over communicate is often good, but we would do it too much where they just started asking so many things that it was really irrelevant. Does it really matter for our perfect partner, at least? Does it really matter what those flooring type we're using? None of that renovation stuff, it matters. What matters is getting them a good return and making it easy for them. That's really what we want to have people, that we want people with those expectations and those demands, I guess, and going down and detailed on the specific renovation things we're doing. We've had some people where we've had, we've told them, look, you can come learn from us, shadow us, because maybe you want to do it yourself down the road. And we're still open to that to this point, but it's got to be really the right person there. We really don't have the time or don't want to spend the time really going too deep on that stuff, because we have our systems already in play with that, right? And that's what they're buying into. So to question those just is kind of silly. It's kind of eliminating our value, right?
Right. And I'm sure you've got it still a long list of things that you go through. So if somebody does approach you, I'm guessing that's how it's going to happen right now. you're pretty out there in the public. So people approach you, you're likely not having to go and find, in my opinion, but you can correct me if I'm wrong, but people to lend you money and financing because they likely will be approaching you. But what are some of the things that you do? Okay, so now they reach out to you and they say, I'm interested in joint venturing with you. Do you meet them? Do you have a phone conversation? Do you do a letter of intent? Like, how do you go about that?
Yeah, usually we have usually a phone conversation now, especially 2020. This year has been a lot of phone conversations, which has been nice in some ways. But usually they end up in our office in some way, sitting down. We usually might take them out to see a project or two that we have ongoing, just so they get a feel for what we're doing. And then we do still reach out for partners, by the way, not as much as we would normally, but a lot of those come through referrals from other partners. So we don't necessarily reach out cold to people like we have in the past, but yeah, we would take them in. They'd come meet with us in our office after maybe an initial phone kind of qualification process to see if it's a potential fit. Come meet, talk about it. Usually it's really one good meeting. It might be an hour or so going through all the details. They're going to want to know probably some questions, typical ones, what the process all looks like, give an overview. A lot of times it's, why am I bringing all the money? That still comes up quite a bit, as I'm sure it does with almost everyone. What are you actually getting paid on? What parts of this are you getting paid directly on? Maybe outside of this, because we have all the different companies. They're often asking, where we're really making our money. Then we go show them a property or two, get a feel for it, and then ultimately to kind of engage and get the process going, we do a letter of intent. It's usually $5,000 as a refundable deposit that we will put towards the deal, or we'll refund it back to them over after 6 months. So if we don't find anything in 6 months, refund it back. And if we do, obviously we'll put that into the deal. So that's our process to kind of get it going. Once you find something, we'll reach out, say, hey, we got something ready to go. Here's the details, whatever questions they have at that point, obviously. And then are we going to proceed or not? And then we get it kind of into the whole deal. I don't know if we can go deeper on that if you want, but that's kind of the launching phase, at least.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. And I like that you mentioned too, that you take the $5,000 that's refundable, but it definitely shows that they're not just, talking about it, but they're willing to commit something to it. Right. And I think that's the important piece as well, because you could be doing all of this work and figuring out what the JVs need. And then all of a sudden you have the perfect deal for them. And they're like, oh, well, you know what? I'm actually not interested anymore. Right. So like, how do you keep them, maybe it's 4, 5, 6 months later, like, how do you keep them still engaged other than I think the $5,000 piece that's refundable, I think is really smart. Anything else that you do?
And we've had that scenario happen. That's why we've put that into place. We've had that scenario happen on a deal closing like a week from today, and they're bailing on it. And so anything to avoid those type of scenarios, those obviously put us in a rough spot. So we wanted to avoid those, which is why we've input that 5,000, which is really not a big amount of money at the end of the day. Most of our partners, like our initial qualification from a money standpoint, is they need 300,000 to put into it, which gets you your typical triplex, fourplex in a Hamilton area project, plus the renovation costs, or at least vast majority of the renovation costs, depending on the deal. So, yeah, sorry, what was I'm missing out on the question there.
I totally forgot my question too. I was asking, we'll edit this out. I was just asking if there's anything else other than the 5,000 that you do. So like, do you keep calling them engaged, or checking up on them every so often? If you've got like something that you think is coming close, or if you've got nothing and you're keeping an eye, do you like let them know that you're still actively looking for them?
So that's part of the expectations we set now, which is that we are not going to follow up with them all the time about every little deal that comes up. Usually it's, hey, we're ready to go here. This is a good one. Let's do it. So that's part of the expectations we set there, is that, hey, we're not going to call you about every deal. Don't be alarmed if you'll probably hear from us anyways. Like, hey, just let you know we're still looking, but you're probably not going to hear from us every week because 5 more triplexes got listed this week and that's what we're looking for. You'll probably hear from us within a month. Like 6 months is a really long time. We're always going to find something before that, unless we're looking for bigger stuff. But for that typical bread and butter type deal we do, we're going to find something within 2 months at most usually. And so in that time, they're only, if we're calling them about, hey, this is the property we should look at, it's because we're buying it. Like it's not very many that we're not going to go through. Unless something's totally changed on their end, we're typically finding the deal and just going at it at that point. We don't want to waste people's time. We don't want to waste our time or their time. So it's not really worth it a lot to us unless they really, really have a different expectation and they want to learn a lot more, which is not our perfect person. So it's not very often we're doing that, but that time to time, that might be the scenario too. So a couple of scenarios there, I guess, but yeah, you're not hearing from us till you get the deal, really.
Thanks for listening to the REITE Club podcast and joining our community of real estate investors online at thereiteclub.com, where the focus is about helping you grow. We look forward to seeing you again next week. Thanks from your hosts, Sarah Larby and Alfonso Salemi.